Afghanistan is the birthplace of Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet whose verses are the most read poetry in the world today. Yet today, the United Nations Special Rapporteur says clearly, the Taliban is unparalleled in its misogyny. Afghanistan is the home of the Blue Mosque of Mazar-e-Sharif, of the Bamiyan Valley, of the ancient cities on the Silk Road. 5,000 years of civilization? And yet today, Afghan women cannot leave home without a male guardian. They cannot show their faces in public. They cannot enter parks, they cannot enter gyms, they cannot enter beauty salons. Before August 2021, 3.5 million Afghan girls were in school. Thousands of women studied in universities. 28% of Afghan members of parliament were women. Women worked as doctors, judges, teachers, engineers and journalists. Since 2021, girls above 6th grade are banned from school. Every university has closed its doors to women. All female civil servants have been dismissed. All female judges have been removed. 3 Afghan women became known to the world only after they were forced to leave home. Fawzia Koofi, the first woman deputy speaker of the Afghan parliament, one of only 4 women at the peace talks with the Taliban and a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. In August 2020, she survived an assassination attempt in which she was shot in both arms. After the Taliban took Kabul in 2021, she was placed under house arrest. Today she lives with her 2 daughters in London, and she continues to fight for Afghan women. Zara Joya, a journalist from the Hazara community. She founded Rukhsana Media in 2020, the first Afghan news outlet dedicated entirely to women's stories. As a child under the first Taliban regime, she went to school in secret, dressed as a boy. Named to Time magazine's Women of the Year list in 2022, she was evacuated from Kabul by the British government after the second Taliban takeover. Today she runs a team of 9 women journalists who still report from inside Afghanistan under pseudonyms from her office in London. Khalida Papal, the first captain of Afghanistan's national women's football team, founder of the organisation Girl Power, and author of the 2024 memoir My Beautiful Sisters. She fled Afghanistan in 2011 after death threats for founding the women's team and exposing corruption in the Football Federation. She spent almost a year in a refugee camp. Today she lives in Denmark. After the Taliban took Kabul in 2021, she personally organised the evacuation of 79 women footballers and their families from Afghanistan to Pakistan. Today, we tell you why hundreds of thousands more Afghan women were forced to flee too. You are watching the Human Rights Expert Witness channel. We are country expert witnesses based in London. We write expert reports for immigration tribunals in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada and the European Union. For this episode, we have reviewed several Afghan asylum cases, all anonymised. A woman doctor who worked in Kabul until August 2021 and was dismissed the week the Taliban entered the city. A former judge who tried Taliban members before 2021 and whose name was later found on their revenge lists. A journalist who worked for Tolo News and whose colleague was killed. A Hazara Shia teacher whose school was bombed. A woman who ran a beauty salon in Herat, closed and burned by the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. A Ministry of Women's Affairs official who lost her job when the Taliban shut the ministry down. A young Kabul student who was in her 2nd year at the university when the doors closed on women. Today, we walk through every one of those reasons. If you are looking for a country expert witness, our verified list of qualified experts is linked in the description below. Afghanistan's story with women's rights is longer and stranger than most people know. It begins over a century ago. In 1919, King Amanullah Khan gained independence for Afghanistan from British influence. 6 years later, he legalised women's education. In 1928, he was overthrown by a revolt against, among other things, girls being sent to school. That fight has never stopped. Under the monarchy and later under the communists, Afghan women slowly gained ground. By 1977, half of Kabul university students were women. Women worked as doctors, engineers and judges. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded. The war lasted a decade. When the Soviets left, civil war followed until in 1996 the Taliban took Kabul. The first Taliban regime, from 1996 to 2001, banned women from work, from school, from leaving home without a male guardian. In 2001, they blew up the twin 53-metre Buddha statues of Bamiyan, one of the greatest cultural heritage sites in the world. Later that year, after the September 11th attacks in the United States, an international coalition invaded Afghanistan and drove the Taliban from power. For 20 years, from 2001 to 2021, Afghanistan tried again. Girls returned to school. Women returned to university. Women returned to parliament. By 2020, 3.5 million girls were in school. 28% of members of parliament were women. In February 2020, the United States signed the Doha Agreement with the Taliban without the Afghan government at the table. Fawzia Koofi was one of only 4 women at the intra-Afghan talks that followed. In August 2020, she was shot on the road to Kabul. She survived. On the 15th of August 2021, the Taliban entered Kabul. President Ashraf Ghani fled. The international coalition airlifted about 120,000 people out of the country. Many women who had worked as judges, journalists, activists, or with international organisations were left behind. Fawzia Koofi was placed under house arrest. In the years since, the Taliban has issued more than 100 edicts restricting women's lives. The United Nations Special Rapporteur has described this as, quote, reinstituting, step by step, the same system of 1996.
These violations include forced early and child marriage, restrictions on women's attire and movement, exclusion from education and public life, and barriers to employment. These rights violations also align with those reported by the special procedures under Taliban rule in the 1990s.
In September 2024, the Taliban formally codified what it calls the Law on the Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, criminalizing conduct such as women's voices in public, eye contact between unrelated men and women, and the sound of women singing. The United Nations Human Rights Council calls Afghanistan today, quote, a graveyard for human rights. It says women and girls face extreme gender-based discrimination and oppression that amounts to persecution. The system of segregation, in the words of the Council, is reminiscent of apartheid, based on gender.
Afghanistan is a graveyard for human rights. The cascade of edicts and laws announced by the de facto authorities since coming to power in 2021 is having a crushing impact on the Afghan people, particularly women and girls.
And this is where we are today. Now we will show you who is in danger. If you are in Afghanistan today and you belong to one of these groups, you may be at risk. Almost every group on this list is a group of women because the Taliban has built a system that erases women from public life by design. 1. All Afghan women and girls above the age of 12. Every one of you falls under the education ban. 2. Former women judges, prosecutors and lawyers, many are on Taliban revenge lists. 3. Former women, members of parliament, ministers, provincial governors and civil servants. 4. Journalists and media workers, especially women and those who worked for foreign or independent outlets. 5. Women human rights defenders and civil society activists. 6. Hazara Shia women, both an ethnic and a religious minority, repeatedly targeted by the Islamic State Khorasan province and by Taliban policies. 7. Women who worked for international organizations, the previous government or the international coalition. 8. Women athletes, singers, artists and public figures. 9. Gay, lesbian and transgender Afghans. Same-sex relations carry the death penalty under Taliban law. 10. Christian converts, Bahá'ís, Ahmadis and Muslims who leave Islam. All face the death penalty for apostasy. 11. Women who refuse forced marriage or who flee domestic violence. 12. Family members of anyone in categories 1 through 11. Husbands, brothers, sons and daughters are used as hostages. If you recognise yourself in this list, keep watching. If you're in a similar situation, you can find a list of country expert reports for Afghanistan on our website. You can use them as evidence in your asylum claim. You can also find a verified list of country expert witnesses. The link is in the description. And now, let us look at the 5 main reasons Afghan women flee today. In March 2022, the Taliban banned all girls above the 6th grade from school. This means no education for girls from about the age of 12 onwards. In December 2022, they banned all women from universities. Every institution of higher education in Afghanistan closed its doors to women in a single day. Medical schools, law schools, engineering, journalism, everything. The impact is catastrophic. Girls who had spent 10 years in school were told that morning and never went back. Women who were in their final year of medical school were told they could not finish. Afghanistan is the only country in the world today where half of the population is banned from formal education.
Regrettably, the Taliban has not rescinded any of its gender oppressive measures, nor the human rights restrictions affecting other groups.
For a while, informal religious education, known as madrasa, was still allowed for girls. But in 2025, the United Nations Special Rapporteur reported that even this last option is being closed. There is now nowhere in Afghanistan where a girl can learn beyond primary level. Zara Joya is a journalist from the Hazara community. She grew up under the first Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001. As a young girl, she wanted to go to school. Girls were banned. Her family cut her hair, gave her boys' clothes, and she went to school as a boy for years. When the Taliban fell in 2001, she was finally able to study as herself. She became a journalist. In 2020, she founded Rukhsana Media, named after a young Afghan woman stoned to death for eloping. It became the first Afghan news outlet dedicated entirely to women's stories. When the Taliban returned in August 2021, she received an emergency evacuation notice from the British government and was airlifted from Kabul. She now runs Rukhsana Media from London, with a team of 9 women journalists who still report from inside Afghanistan, under pseudonyms with real risk to their lives. In April 2025, she spoke at the International Journalism Festival in Perugia about how her journalists work. The Taliban has banned Afghan women from almost every kind of paid work. Within weeks of August 2021, all female civil servants were sent home. In December 2022, women were banned from working for non-governmental organisations. In April 2023, they were banned from working for the United Nations. In July 2023, all beauty salons in the country were ordered closed. 50,000 women lost their jobs overnight. The system that enforces all this is the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, known simply as the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. It was resurrected from the first Taliban regime.
Activities by the de facto Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice and the impact on Afghans expelled from neighboring countries are also examined.
The details are almost unbelievable. Women cannot travel more than 72 kilometers without a male guardian called a mahram in Arabic. Women's voices in public forums are prohibited. Eye contact between unrelated men and women is forbidden by decree. Women singing is banned. Women cannot enter parks, gyms or public bathhouses. Beauty salons are closed. Even the sound of a woman reading the Quran aloud to another woman was ruled forbidden in one recent edict. For 20 years, Afghan women were in parliament, on the bench, in ministries and in newsrooms. On the 15th of August 2021, all of it ended. The Afghan parliament dissolved. 28% of its members were women. Almost all of them fled or were killed. The Ministry of Women's Affairs, established after 2001 to protect women's rights, was shut down and replaced by the Ministry of Vice and Virtue in its former offices. Over 200 women judges lost their positions. Some were murdered. Others fled to Australia, Canada and Europe with the help of international campaigns. Independent media was crushed. Female journalists, once a quarter of Afghan reporters, are now less than 5% of the surviving workforce. Many outlets have moved to Islamabad, Doha and London to continue reporting. Fawzia Koofi is one of the most important political figures of modern Afghanistan. She became the first woman Deputy Speaker of the Afghan Parliament in 2005. She served as a Member of Parliament from Badakhshan province for over a decade. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 2020, when the United States and the Taliban began peace talks in Doha, she was one of only 4 women in the Afghan negotiating team, at the same table as the men who had made her wear a burqa and denied her a formal education. In August 2020, she was shot on the road back to Kabul and was wounded in both arms. She survived. When Kabul fell in August 2021, she was placed under house arrest. She was eventually able to leave Afghanistan for the United Kingdom. Today, she lives in London with her 2 daughters. She travels the world meeting heads of state, speaking to the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and refusing to let the world forget Afghan women. Under the 20-year republic, Afghan women played football, cricket, boxing, cycling and karate. They competed internationally. In 2017, an Afghan woman climbed Mount Everest for the first time. In 2021, all of this ended overnight. The Taliban banned all women's sports. Every women's team was dissolved. Every women's stadium session was cancelled. Every women's competition was cancelled. All women's arts, all singing, all cinema. The salons closed. The parks closed to women. The gyms closed to women. In 2025, the Taliban even banned poems that, quote, praise romantic love.
A new so-called law banning poems which criticize the Taliban leader, praise romantic love, and encourage relationships between men and women.
Khalida Bhopal is the first captain of the Afghan women's national football team, which was founded in 2007. She was already fighting corruption in the Afghan Football Federation, and she used the platform of the national team to speak for Afghan women more broadly. In 2011, she received death threats. She fled Afghanistan through India, then Norway, then Denmark, where she spent almost a year in a refugee camp before being granted residency. Today she works with the international sports brand Hummel and with international non-governmental organisations on women's sport in conflict zones. When Kabul fell in August 2021, she personally organised the evacuation of 79 women footballers and their families from Afghanistan to Pakistan. She founded the organisation Girl Power. In 2024, she published her memoir under the title My Beautiful Sisters, telling the story of the players who once represented Afghanistan on the world stage and who are now scattered across the globe. Some Afghan women face double or triple layers of persecution. The Hazara are one of Afghanistan's largest ethnic minorities, roughly 10 to 12% of the population. They are predominantly Shia Muslim in a majority Sunni country. They have been persecuted for over a century. In September 2022, the Islamic State Khorasan province bombed the Kaj Education Center in the Hazara neighborhood of Dasht-e-Bachi in West Kabul. 53 students, most of them girls preparing for university entrance, were killed. The Taliban did not respond to the attack. Zara Joya's Rukhsana Media was among the outlets that documented what happened to Hazara girls. Same-sex relations between adults were already illegal under the 20-year republic. Under the Taliban, they carry the death penalty by stoning, hanging or crushing. Gay, lesbian and transgender Afghans, if identified, are killed. Many have gone into hiding or into forced marriages of the opposite sex to survive. Some have escaped through emergency evacuation networks organised by international organisations. Since the takeover, forced marriage of girls, including girls as young as 9, has increased dramatically. Families in poverty sell daughters. Taliban commanders take girls as, quote, wives. The Ministry of Vice and Virtue does not intervene because the Taliban's own interpretation of Sharia law does not consider forced marriage a crime.
Women and girls face extreme gender-based discrimination and oppression that amounts to persecution. The system of segregation is reminiscent of apartheid, based on gender rather than race.
Since August 2021, roughly 1.6 million Afghans have registered as refugees or asylum seekers. Around 6 million people were internally or externally displaced. The main destinations tell you where the world has and has not helped. Iran and Pakistan host about 90% of Afghan refugees. Around 3 million in Iran, around 2 million in Pakistan. Conditions are difficult. Since 2023, Pakistan has begun mass deportations back to Afghanistan. Iran has done similar. These are not safe long-term homes. Germany received the largest European share, around 300,000 Afghans since 2021. Recognition rates for women are very high, often over 70%, especially for gender-based claims. Canada resettled tens of thousands under the Special Immigration Measures Programme. Zara Joya was airlifted through this network. The United Kingdom created the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy and the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme. Slow, but functional. Recognition rates for Afghan women are among the highest of any country group. Fawzia Koofi arrived through this route. Zara Joya as well. Australia received large numbers under emergency evacuation, including former women judges. The United States received tens of thousands under Operation Allies Welcome and the Special Immigrant Visa Programme. 2025 and 2026 policy changes have narrowed some pathways. Denmark. Khalida Bhopal lives here. And one important warning. Return to Afghanistan is not safe for any woman fitting the profiles in this video. Return through Iran, Pakistan or the Gulf carries a real risk of deportation onward. Asylum is granted when the state cannot protect you from a well-founded fear of persecution on one of the 5 grounds of the Refugee Convention. For Afghan women, multiple grounds are engaged. Membership of a particular social group is the most important ground for Afghan women. In fact, in 2024, the Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that Afghan women, as a group, meet the criteria of a particular social group persecuted for reason of gender. That ruling means Afghan women in the European Union are, essentially, presumed refugees. Political opinion, real or imputed. This applies to former members of parliament, judges, journalists, women's rights defenders, and family members of political figures. Religion. This applies to Muslim converts to Christianity, Baha'is, Ahmadis, and anyone accused of leaving Islam. Race and ethnicity. This applies to Hazara Shia Afghans, to the Sikh minority, and to other ethnic minorities. Nationality. Some pathways use nationality-based emergency programs. The biggest question in Afghan cases is not the persecution. That is well documented by the United Nations. The question is internal relocation. Courts sometimes ask, can your client not just move to a different part of Afghanistan or to a neighbouring country? The honest answer from a country expert is no. The Taliban controls every province, the Ministry of Vice and Virtue operates nationwide, Iran and Pakistan are deporting Afghans back, the Gulf states have limited long-term status for Afghan women. There is no safe internal relocation and no safe regional relocation for women fitting any of the profiles in this video. The expert witness cannot accept or reject the applicant's testimony. That is the court's role. The expert assesses the applicant's account against the country situation and provides a detailed opinion on the risk of return. In most cases, if the court accepts the information provided, return to Afghanistan is not safe, and asylum can be granted. This is why a personal assessment of every case is critically important. A country that in the 20th century sent women to university, to parliament, and to the football pitch. None of that is in question. What is in question is the system that rules Afghanistan today. Every girl above the age of 12 out of school. Every university closed to women. All female civil servants dismissed. All women's sport banned. Women's voices banned in public. Even the sound of women singing forbidden. The United Nations Special Rapporteur calls this system unparalleled in its misogyny. The Human Rights Council calls Afghanistan, quote, a graveyard for human rights. Fawzia Kufi lives in London with her 2 daughters and refuses to let the world forget. Zara Joya runs Rukhsana Media from London, with 9 journalists reporting from inside Afghanistan under pseudonyms. Khalida Popal lives in Denmark, and after August 2021 personally organised the evacuation of 79 women footballers. The pattern is the same: silence and detention at home, or freedom and exile abroad, doing the work of remembering and speaking. If you are an Afghan woman seeking asylum, you need a country expert report that supports your case. If you are a solicitor, you need an expert who knows the difference between the 2022 Education Edict and the 2022 University Ban, between the Ministry of Women's Affairs of 2001 and the Ministry of Vice and Virtue of 2024, and between Hazara Shia targeting and general Taliban policy. Subscribe to the channel for the next country in our Why People Flee series. Comment below to tell us which country we should cover next. Share this video with anyone who needs it. Half of a country, erased in a single year. This is why Afghan women flee. See you in the next one.